We recently got news about the recent every quarter, fiscal quarter, they release the GDP numbers, and that's our gross domestic product, which is the measure of the economic output of the country, how much we produce. It includes things, it's the formula for it, something like consumer spending plus manufactured goods plus services, rendered. So, uh, one thing to note is that about 70% of the US economy is based on consumer spending. Our economy is held afloat by people spending money. So, because we've moved so much of our manufacturing uh, overseas. And so, we got the recent GDP numbers are in, and what they found is that the US economy the GDP has contracted by the GDP contraction is the worst contraction on record in US history, and it's by a lot. Uh, this article here is from NPR. It's titled 3 Months of Hell. US economy drops 32.9% in worst GDP report ever. This is from July 30th. And I'm just going to read a little bit from here. The coronavirus pandemic triggered the sharpest economic contraction in modern American history, the Commerce Department reported Thursday. Gross domestic product, the broadest measure of economic activity, shrank at an annual rate of 32.9% in the second quarter as restaurants and retailers closed their doors in a desperate effort to slow the spread of the virus, which has killed more than 150,000 people in the US. Just note, US has 5% of the world's population, yet we have over 25% of the world's COVID-19 cases and deaths. So we're number one. That's the US. Always leading the charge there. So the economic shock in April, May, and June was more than 3 times as sharp as the previous record, 10% in 1958, and nearly 4 times the worst quarter during the Great Recession. So we're talking about 4 times worse than the worst quarter during the 2008 housing crisis and Great Recession, and more than 3 times as sharp as the previous record on file, which was in 1958. Of course, this doesn't include. Okay, yeah, So that's the sharpest decline in history. It was in 1958, 10%, and those numbers are annualized. So that means that it's essentially projected out as what would happen if this rate continued on for a year. What would the rate be? The actual contraction was something like 10.5% or so. So just to put that in perspective, here's a graph that shows what that looks like. This is 50 years of GDP annualized. So these are all normalized to so that you're seeing, they're based on the same formula for calculating this. And you can see, I mean, where you're seeing the black, those are quarters where the GDP increased. That's, what you typically want to see is GDP growth. There's this idea in capitalism of like infinite growth. We can always be growing and growing and growing. It just will never end. And so what you'll see here is that this is 50 years. And then look at the very end here. That red line that you see at the very end is it's essentially off the charts. I mean, the old charts just, they didn't show below 15% on the old charts. There was nothing below 10%. So, there no drop and no annualized GDP drop ever reached beyond 10%. And here we're talking about 32.9%. And so, I've seen articles, and I should have pulled one up from the New York Times, for instance, where they're really trying to sugarcoat these numbers, and they're warning you that, okay, don't pay too much attention to these numbers because this is a really unique circumstance, and so we should really be paying attention to this other number, the 10.5% number, because the economy only contracted by 10.5%. Dude, even 10.5%, if it wasn't even annualized, right, is worse than the worst annualized GDP drop on record. So what we're talking about, this is, I mean, you'll see some of the quotes from here. A quote from Nariman Behravesh, chief economist at IHS Markit, says, "Horrific. We've never seen anything quite like it." So So yeah, so this is where we're at. You know, our the GDP is you know, just a broad measure of our economic activity and doesn't tell the exact story on the ground for most Americans. Oftentimes, our GDP will have GDP growth while still we have millions, you know, over 500,000 people homeless and people struggling economically all across the country. So this isn't the only way that we should measure the economy, but it is something, and it is the indicator that capitalists love to use. And so this is their measures that we're basing this off of, and it's horrendous. What this shows is that what happened here is unprecedented, and we should be alarmed by these numbers because what this means. And now, just keep this in mind as we continue on, because again, I'm going to try to link these through in some of these stories that I do today. Some of these will be cut into clips, and so if you're watching a clip of this, just check out some of the other clips, and you'll see. I'll try to put this into a playlist so you can see some of the other clips and hopefully see how this weaves together. So just keep this in mind as we continue on and as we talk, that this contraction is historic, and what we're talking about at this point is historic decline for the U.S.
Thanks for watching Radical Democracy Podcast. I'm your host, Kamali Rose. Please like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, and if it doesn't bother you, hit that bell below to receive notifications whenever we go live or launch a new video. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if you can afford it, do me a huge favor and head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/radicaldemocracy and throw me a few bucks. Whatever you can afford, it goes a long way, and I will greatly appreciate it. It helps the channel to continue to exist and to grow, and I really appreciate the support. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you soon. All right, peace. All right, that was a good one. That one's it.